You know that we are going through the inaugural sermon of Jesus. This is the first sermon he ever preached, and there is so much on this and in this message. And we are just going through it and looking at the main points that come throughout the sermon and seeing how they apply and how wise they are even now 2,000 years later. In fact, I would suggest they're probably even more relevant today than they've ever been and more needed today than they've ever been. These are words of life and words of hope and words to live by. And in these times, I think most of us are looking for a little extra to live by. Am I right? I mean, these are times where we are trying to get through each day, trying to adjust to all these dramatic changes, wondering what the future is going to hold. And each month seems to bring something different, something new, something more maybe to worry about, something more to wonder about, more challenges. And so I don't know about you, but I'm looking for something strong to anchor my life to. I'm looking for a word from God. And I think these first words of Jesus form a beautiful place to anchor our values, our goals, our lifestyle, to become a vision, a mission, a purpose, all the words that you can think of to guide us as we go throughout this time. And so we have in Matthew 33, 5:33, the words of Jesus that say this: "Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made.' But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it's God's throne, or by the earth, for it's his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot even make one hair white or black. All you need to simply say is yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." All right, so Jesus starts here by having us think about this concept of taking an oath. And I will tell you that back in this day, this was probably something a little more common than we would do today. Although I think even today, we will at times say, "Oh, I swear it's true. I swear by this. I swear by that. You don't believe me? I swear." Or if we're trying to convince someone, we might even use the word oath, or we might use the word promise today. "I promise you. I promise, cross my heart." Remember that one from school? We use certain phrases when we want to convince somebody that what we are saying is true, that we will keep our word. And we might think immediately here, why does Jesus have an issue with this? What is his objection to the taking of an oath? Because it was a common practice. And as you can see here, Jesus mentions that people apparently would take or swear an oath by heaven. So maybe I make an oath to you as long as the heavens are up there that, this will happen. Or apparently they would swear by the earth. Or apparently they would swear by Jerusalem. And apparently even they would swear by their own head. I swear to you by the hairs on my head, I will do this, or this will happen, or you can trust me on this. And so Jesus takes this on. And we want to take a look at this and see what he's actually teaching and what he is getting at. And the first thing that we have to understand is that when Jesus is addressing these issues, he is actually quoting here from the Old Testament. And when he says, "Do not swear at all by either heaven, for it's God's throne, or by the earth, for it's his footstool," this is a reference that is made actually a couple times, but maybe most prominently in Isaiah 66. In Isaiah 66, 1 and 2, It says, "This is what the Lord says. Heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is the house you will build for me? Where will be my resting place? Has not my hand made all these things? So they came into being, declares the Lord." So even in Isaiah, and Jesus is referencing Isaiah 66 here, Isaiah has the Lord saying, hey, I made heaven, the earth is my footstool, I made everything, I am the creator, I am the owner. All of this comes from me. And so Jesus quotes this, pointing us back to saying, why are you swearing by things that you have no control over? You didn't control heaven. You don't control earth. And your oath has no more validity because you use these things to back it up, because they are not your things to use. You can't swear by them because you don't have them. They aren't in your possession. They don't add any more validity to your words. And I looked up this concept of the earth is my footstool. And I found something kind of interesting in that original language, which makes a little more sense to me. This terminology, the earth is my footstool, as it's translated into English, in the original language, it's actually referring to a particular metaphor or a particular image. And the image is that you have your enemy under your foot. So the image here is of a triumphant king capturing the enemy king and placing his foot on the enemy's neck and standing there, maybe with his sword held high in victory. And so when we're referring to the earth, it says that the earth actually belongs to God. He is the one who rules. The earth may think it rules itself. We may think we rule things, that we may think the kings of this earth rule this earth. But the Bible says, no, the true victor, the true king, the one who actually has all the power, is the one who sits on the throne, the one who reigns from heaven. He is the king above all kings. And so it's a very strong kind of metaphor there. And I personally don't like the word footstool there, because that just seems kind of like a soft image that doesn't capture the original language and how strongly they are saying that God is the one who is king. He is the victor. He's in charge. He rules. And so Jesus says, you can't swear by heaven because that's where God's throne is. You don't have control. God is in control. And you can't swear by the earth either, because God rules the earth. The earth belongs to him. He made everything in it. And you can't swear by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And if you look in Psalm 48, we have that exact same terminology. So Jesus, again, showing he knows the Torah, he knows the prophets and the law. And Psalm 48, 1-3 says, great is the Lord and most worthy of praise in the city of our God, his holy mountain. Beautiful it is loftiness, the joy of the whole earth. Like the heights of Zaphon is Mount Zion, the city of the great king. So here in Psalm 48, it refers to Jerusalem. It refers to Mount Zion as the city of the great king. And you might ask, well, which king? Well, initially, we would say maybe it's talking about David. They called Jerusalem the city of David. But when you look at the context of Psalm 48, it's David who's writing, and he's talking about it being the city of the great king. In fact, the next verse in Psalm 48 says, God is in her citadels. He has shown himself to be her fortress. So the great king is God himself. And again, here's this imagery of God being the one who's in charge. And I bring all this up because this now helps us set the stage and the context for understanding what Jesus means when he's talking about why we should not make an oath and why we should not invoke these kind of things or anything at all. And right away we can see he's saying because God is ultimately in control. God is the one that ordains what will happen and what won't happen. God is the one who holds tomorrow. So I may make an oath to you that I'm going to do something for you tomorrow or next week, and I could swear by heaven or I could swear by earth. But Jesus says, don't make that oath because you can't promise tomorrow. You can't promise that that will happen. And so this oath taking, immediately we see that Jesus has a problem with it because it's saying we have the ultimate power. And he says, we need to remember we don't have the power. There is one who rules above all of us. Now, he's a good God, he's a great king, but he ultimately is the only one who knows the future. He's the only one who can swear and fulfill his promises. His promises are true. Now, our intentions may be good. We may intend to do something, but Jesus then goes on to say, don't even swear by your own head because you can't even control your hair color. Now, today we do dye our hair a lot, and a lot of people do that, but we can't control when our hair goes gray. We can't control what color we were born with. We can't control when we will lose it, how much we will lose. We can't control even the things about our own body. And so Jesus again reminds us, we do not have the ultimate control. And he's not doing this, I don't think, to be mean. I think he's doing it to put us into touch with reality, to bring us into harmony with the truth. And also, it's a freeing truth. Because I don't know about you, but I'm really glad that I'm not the one that's in control. I'm really glad I'm not the king of this universe. I'm glad I'm not the one responsible for everything. That would be an overwhelming thing, and I certainly would not be up to that task. I don't even want to run. If you came to me and said, Rick, how about you run for president? We'll get your campaign going. We can get a bunch of people who want you to be president. I think you have a shot at it. I would say, no way. In fact, I might start swearing myself at that because just the thought of having that kind of responsibility is terrifying. I don't know how anyone could be a world leader, and especially the president of the United States, where you know that lives literally depend on your decisions 24/7. And you have to make decisions that will determine whether someone lives or dies, or whether there's peace or war, or if there's help or not help, and so many decisions that affect so many people's lives and affect the world at large. So quite frankly, I think Jesus is freeing us. He's saying, you don't have to take the burden of controlling every outcome. And so that's what brings us to his admonition. And that is a powerful one. And this is where we want to spend most of our time. Verse 37. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Or as it says more literally in the Greek, let your yes be yes and your no be no. I think this is one of the most beautiful teachings that Jesus has given us. And I also think it's one of the most powerful teachings. And unfortunately, I think it's one of the most ignored teachings of Jesus. Let's stop and think for a moment about our words. Do you ever think about what you say? Well, I hope you take some thought about it. Some of us may be a little less than others. I know some of us are speak first, think later. And some of us won't even speak until we've thought about something for a long time. But what I want you to do this morning is step back and think, how do I use words? Did you know you use words? Do you know that words have power? I remember years ago reading a book called Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And it was a powerful book, and I recommend it to anyone. And he labels 12 spiritual disciplines in the book that he suggests we need to consider as Christians to grow us and develop us. And one of the spiritual disciplines he lists is the spiritual discipline of silence and solitude. And Richard points out very eloquently, and I've never forgotten reading that chapter, because it hit me so hard as he just paints this beautiful picture about the power of the spiritual discipline of silence. And he reminds us that our words are what we use so often to manipulate others. We use our words on behalf of our sinful nature very frequently. And we may not even realize consciously that we're doing it. What do I mean by manipulate? Well, the definition of manipulate is this: to control or influence a person or a situation cleverly, unfairly, or unscrupulously. Have you ever felt like someone was trying to manipulate you? If you did, it's probably through their words, right? Words are what we use as a primary tool to manipulate others. Now, not all manipulation has to be bad, but by definition, it's usually unfair or clever or unscrupulous. Does that mean we should never use words? No, I'm just trying to draw your attention to the fact that many times we use our words for the pure purpose of manipulating others. And I suggest we do it sometimes even unconsciously, not even aware that we are trying to get our way. So Richard Foster in his book, Celebration of Discipline, writes this: one reason we can hardly bear to remain silent is that it makes us feel so helpless. If I told you that you had to go 24 hours without speaking, do you think you could do it? That would be challenging, wouldn't it? And you say, well, can I have a pen and paper, something I could write notes to people or at least communicate in some way? And probably the first thing your mind thinks is, well, if I have to be silent, how else could I communicate? Can I text people? Does that count? But what if you couldn't use words for 24 hours? Do you think at some point during that 24-hour period, you would feel helpless? I think so. Words empower us. We count on our words to get to what we want and what we need. And we count on our words to manipulate life and to manipulate others so that we can get what we want, or we can make them think what we want, or however it may go. And Richard Foster is right. When we think about being silent, there's this kind of scary powerlessness about it. And I think Jesus is trying to kind of get us to think about this, because should we be scared of silence? Do we need to rely on our words to defend ourselves, to justify ourselves, to make ourselves look better? to control our lives, others, outcomes? Or is Jesus subtly trying to remind us of the one who is in control, the one who doesn't manipulate, but ordains all things to work for good? Wouldn't it be better that we let him be God? We let him do the leading? You see, there's a challenge to us in trying to not use words in behalf of our sinful nature. But Jesus is also trying to free us into the good news that we don't have to manipulate things. We don't have to manipulate others. We don't have to control. And for any of us that have been on the other end of this, there is nothing that is more hurtful, more frustrating, or maybe even just annoying than when you know someone is trying to manipulate you. In fact, there's a good reason that a lot of sales techniques have changed over the years, because they realized, for instance, at car dealerships that nobody wanted to go buy a car because the salesmen were too strong with their approach. And they would manipulate you and try to get you to buy, and don't you need this extra feature and this extra feature? And then suddenly they realized nobody's coming to our business anymore. Why? Because nobody wants to be manipulated. Nobody wants to feel like you're being used, you're being lied to somehow benefit the other party. It's a horrible feeling. It's even worse when it comes not from a salesman, but from someone we love, someone we trust. In fact, some of our biggest wounds can come from people who tried to manipulate us or use us for their own ends, for their own purpose, or when someone has lied to us so that they could get their way, but leave us with the pain and the consequences. Now, I don't want to do that to others. Do you? I know you don't, but we're all very capable of doing that. So Richard Foster goes on and he says, we are accustomed to relying upon words to manage and control others. And I like how he used the word accustomed, because I think we do it without thinking at times. Sometimes we're very strategic, and sometimes we just do it because it's the way this world works. It's so natural to humanity to use our words, to get our way, to manipulate and control others. We're just accustomed to it. In fact, we may not even be offended when certain people do it to us because it's just what we're used to. Of course, they're going to sell us on this, or of course, they're going to sell us on that, or try to convince us or persuade us, even against our own good. He goes on to say, a frantic stream of words flows from us in an attempt to straighten others out. We want so desperately for them to agree with us, to see things our way. We evaluate people with our words. We judge people with our words. We condemn people with our words. We devour people with our words. Therefore, silence is one of the deepest disciplines of the Spirit. Simply put, because it puts a stop to all of that. That's pretty profound, don't you think? Have you ever thought about how much you use your words to control or manage, to evaluate or judge, to condemn, to put people in their place? I want to challenge you this week to think about what you say. And Jesus' challenge to us is, what if we just tried to speak the simple truth? It doesn't mean that we have to say every true thought that comes to our minds, but when we do speak, we speak thoughtfully and simply, and we look to just speak the truth. Because for a person whose yes means yes and no means no, you don't need to take an oath. You know, it's funny, we use this phrase, we use several different phrases even today. We'll say, well, to be honest with you, I think, to be honest. And if you think about that phrase, what does that mean about everything else that you were saying before that? Or we do use the little phrase, I swear. No, I swear this really happened. Or I swear this. And it implies that whatever you said before wasn't actually that true, but this part is really true. Or we might say, let me be honest with you. Or we might say, honestly, I've got to tell you. And we kind of use these things, not even realizing that it's implying that at other times we may not be honest. We use the phrase, to tell you the truth. Well, to tell you the truth, you know, this is how it went down. Well, why wouldn't you be telling the truth? I think there's a beautiful thing about learning to live where we just learn to be honest, where our yes means yes, our no means no, where we leave our reputation in God's hands, where we leave the actions and behaviors of others in God's hands, where we don't have to control that, where we don't have to control others. It's actually an incredibly liberating and freeing thing if we learn to make our yes be yes and our no be no. I think one of the reasons so many of us struggle with depression, struggle with discouragement, struggle with low energy is because we feel we have to be something that we aren't, that we have to represent ourselves and be something to other people that we really aren't. We have to say things that we don't really believe. We have to put up an image so that people will think we are a certain way or a certain person, or we think a certain thing. And Jesus is saying, you don't have to do that. Just follow me and let your yes be yes and your no be no. Let God be on the throne. He'll take care of everything else. Leave the consequences to him. Now, is everybody going to like it? No. But that's okay. And guess what? We love people that we can trust. We value people when we can trust their words. When you have someone in your life who you know is just honest, you appreciate it. Even if they say some things you don't like or you don't want to hear, you still appreciate their honesty. I remember laughing one day. I was driving in the car and I was listening to NPR, as I often do, and they were sharing a recent research study, and the study went like this, and it was on the topic of honesty. And so they asked people, they said, if your spouse were cheating on you, would you want them to be honest and tell you? Or would you just rather never know about it? Well, what do you think most people answered? I think it was in the 80% of people said they would want to know. Even though it would be painful, even though it would be devastating, they said they wanted to know. And they wanted their spouse to be honest with them, even though it would be tough. Now, in that same survey, they flipped the question and they said, if you were cheating on your spouse, would you tell them? Would you be honest with them? And guess what the answer to that was? About 20% of people said they would confess to it, and the other 80% said they would deny it and lie about it. So we want others to be honest with us, but we want the freedom to not be honest with them. And this is the duplicity of the culture in which we live. This is the reality of the sinful nature. In fact, I would say to you that there is a certain group of people that specialize in manipulation. And I want to talk to you this morning. And I want to tell you, this group of people who specialize in manipulation, you are people who are defined as human. So if you consider yourself a human, then I'm talking to you today. We all, as part of our sinful nature, have this tendency to want to use words to get our way, to make ourselves look better, to manipulate others, to control others. And this is a condition that comes with our birth and this condition called sin. So we all suffer for it. We all suffer with it. And we're all guilty of it. I would suggest to you there are 3 reasons, maybe more, but I'll give you 3 this morning. If you're writing them down, you can make note of them. 3 reasons we use words to manipulate. 1, very simple, we want to get our way. We use our words because there's something we want. That's not always bad, but sometimes it can be. Number 2, sometimes we use our words because we want to get even. We want to get revenge. We want to hurt someone. This is one of the reasons we manipulate. This is one of the reasons we say things that maybe aren't entirely true, but we have an agenda to tear someone down, to hurt them, maybe because they've hurt us. We find out someone talked behind our back, and so we spread a rumor about them. Our spouse accuses us of one thing, so we accuse them of something else. There are many reasons, of course, but this is a powerful one, and this is a dangerous one. And number 3, and this I think is the most prominent reason we manipulate. We manipulate because we're afraid. Because there's a fear. And you say, well, what were we afraid of? What fears do we have? Well, I'm going to give you 4 things that I think we're afraid of and why we use words to deal with those fears. Number 1, we are afraid that others will get angry. So maybe we are being asked about something, and if we told the truth, we're afraid they might get angry at us. If we told someone what we really thought, we're afraid they won't like us. They'll be upset. I remember hearing a story of a little girl in Sunday school class. The teacher asked, "What is a lie?" And the little girl raised her hand and she said, "It's an abomination to the Lord and an ever-present help in times of trouble." And that's one of the reasons we use our words incorrectly, dishonestly, unscrupulously, is because it can be an ever-present help in a time of trouble. And so we don't want to make someone upset or angry. We use our words, number 2, when we want others to think better of us. So we want to protect our image. Maybe we have done something that we feel others will judge us for or think less of us. I think this is a prominent time when we use our words to manipulate. We want to protect our image. We want to present ourselves in a certain way. And number 3, we are afraid of rejection. So we manipulate. We massage the truth because we think if I say the actual truth, if I tell the truth about what I have done or who I am, they will not like me. They will reject me. I think this is a danger in our closest relationships because the more intimate the relationship, the more vulnerable we feel. And so in these intimate relationships, we may not confide certain things because we think, well, I know my spouse won't really like that about me, or they'll be upset to hear that I did that, or I think this way. And so we hide things. You know, it's interesting when you look at the story of the Garden of Eden, it ends with Adam and Eve after they're created in chapter 2, the very last verse of Genesis chapter 2, before Adam and Eve sin, says simply, they were both naked and they felt no shame. I don't think we can even imagine that today. We are so far removed from that perfection. And that word for naked in the Hebrew, it's not just physical nakedness. It's saying they had nothing to hide from each other. They were honest with each other. They just existed together completely, truly themselves. And I think that's God's ideal for us, though admittedly it's a challenge. And I think many of us don't tell the truth and have a hard time being honest, even in our closest relationships, because we're afraid of rejection. We're afraid that someone will say, oh my goodness, you did that? You thought that? I can't deal with this. And that they'll walk away from us, or they will pull away from us, or they'll reject us in some form. I could say a lot about that, but I'll move on to number 4. I think the last thing is we don't tell the truth at times when we're ashamed of what we've done. And maybe even to the point where we are so ashamed that we don't even want to admit it out loud to ourselves. We want to deny it. We want to pretend it never happened. We want to pretend it's not true. Maybe there's some evidence in our life, something we've said or done that goes against everything that we value or we say that we stand for. So of course we're going to deny it. Have you ever heard the phrase, they lied so much they believed their own lies? Or, boy, they told that lie so often, I think they actually believed it. Do you think that's possible? I think it is. I think we are capable of deceiving ourselves to the level where we start to believe our own lie, even though we at one time knew it was a lie. And so we're all in danger in our sinful natural selves of kind of falling into these places where we're no longer our true self, where we no longer feel free to express our true selves, to express our thoughts, our feelings, our values, where we don't feel free to share of our lives with someone else. And Jesus says, you don't have to live that way. I don't want you to live that way. I want to teach you a better way. You know, the Apostle James talks about the tongue, and that's a whole nother sermon, but I just want to call your attention to James chapter 3. And in James 3, starting in verse 5, the apostle puts it this way. And remember, this is the apostle who studied under Jesus. And he goes deeper into this topic of our words. And he talks about it specifically in relationship to our tongue and the power that our tongue has. And in James 3, verse 5, he says, likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. I love that analogy. A whole forest, and we know this living in America with the fires, especially out west. Sometimes it can be just the simplest little thing, just a little spark flying off of a campfire or someone throwing a cigarette down, and a huge forest fire results, one that takes hundreds of firefighters, that takes airplanes and tons of water and everything that we have to start to squelch that fire and put it out. But it was all started by something so small and tiny. And James says, you know, your tongue can be like that small spark. Your words can have great power for evil, in the same way that a forest fire can do a ton of damage in a short amount of time. So verse 6, the tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body. It sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. Woo! Those are strong words from James. Those should really make us think about how we use our tongue and our words. He goes on, all kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. Verse 9, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in his likeness. Think about that. With this tongue we praise God, and that same tongue will curse others who are made in his likeness, who are his children. So out of the same mouth, verse 10, comes praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, he says, this should not be. So James got the words of Jesus. He understood what Jesus was teaching. He understood the power of the tongue, the power for evil, the power for destruction. Jesus urges us, try a new way. Live in the kingdom of God. For in his kingdom, you don't have to justify yourself. You don't have to control others. You don't have to pretend that you're perfect. You don't have to present some sort of image so people will like you. In his kingdom, your yes can simply be yes, and your no can simply be no. There's an old proverb that says, all those who open their mouth close their eyes. I don't know if you've heard that one. All those who open their mouth close their eyes. And this ancient proverb is getting to the fact that sometimes it would be much better for us to keep our mouth closed, to keep our eyes open, to keep our ears open, and to listen to others. Instead of trying to manipulate them, to hear them, to have compassion for them, to, instead of fighting with them, be curious about them. When someone is coming at you, instead of fighting back with words, maybe you ask them more questions. Maybe you try to seek to understand why they're upset, why they're hurt. Maybe instead of trying to put them down like they're putting you down, you try to show them love, compassion, that they do have value. Maybe they've lost track. Maybe they've lost sight of their own value and the fact that Jesus loves them. You can do just as much good with your words as you can evil. And so this morning, I want to leave you with this challenge. This week, starting right now, as this sermon closes, I want to challenge you to think about your words. Are you using them to be a source of good, of a compassion, of encouragement? Are you using them so that you can love others and love God? So you can learn more, grow more, forgive more, heal more? Think about, if you were to get all your closest friends and family members together, would they say that you are a very honest person? Do you use words to manipulate? Do you use words to try to control others? Do you sometimes stretch the truth, massage the truth, or just lie when it's needed? And I'm not saying this to judge you, because I think we all have done it at times. I remember the great teacher and philosopher Dallas Willard, Christian philosopher. He said one of the experiments he would do with his class whenever he was first teaching his course on philosophy is he would ask everyone in the class, do you believe that, no, he would ask them first, they would talk about lying, and he would ask them, how many of you have ever told a lie? And he said, every hand in the class would go up. And then he would ask the class, how many of you are liars? And no hand would go up. And he said, isn't it an interesting duplicity that we have of ourselves? We are not liars. We may tell a lie or two, but we're not liars. That's other people. Other people are liars, but not me. And so Jesus is challenging you, and I am challenging you here at the end of this message. Think about what you're saying. Free yourself from trying to control everything with your words. Speak simply. Speak consciously. Speak compassionately. And maybe if you're not sure what to say, just ask more questions. Learn more from the other side, from the other person. Can you imagine our world if we took Jesus' words seriously? I think we would understand each other much better. I think we would be freed from so much of the pain and wounds that our words inevitably cause. We could trust each other. Our world would be safer. Our world would be more friendly. We could rely on things in this world. We wouldn't need as many lawyers. Sorry, lawyers. We wouldn't need as many police. I mean, it would radically change our society. So it's not a coincidence that Jesus started out talking about sex and violence, and then he went to our words, because he's really addressing the key issues of the societal ills and problems and suffering that we face on this planet. So I challenge you this week, think about your words, think about what you're saying, and try this week to let your yes be yes and your no be no. And I would love to hear from some of you. Email me this week or text me or call me or something. I would love to hear how it goes for you. Because I know when I first started trying to do this, it was way harder than I thought. And it's so easy in a quick moment when it's expedient to just kind of blurt out something that is helpful to you, that changes things, that justifies yourself, even though it may not be completely true. And so it is a discipline. It takes work. I don't think this is something you change overnight, but I think it's something you can start this week and ask God that every day your words can be simply yes, simply no, and you can start to experience the authenticity, the joy, and all that comes with just living in the truth. And that is my prayer for you this week.